When I think of AI and how it's kind of changed, the cyber threat landscape, it's really saving attackers a lot of time, and it's letting them scale because they have so much time on their hands now.
All that and more on Security Intelligence. Hello and welcome to Security Intelligence, IBM's weekly cybersecurity podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kaczynski, and today we have a special episode for you. It's a panel discussion on the role of training in responding to AI attacks. Now, here's what I mean by that. Threat actors have adopted new AI tools with all the same enthusiasm as legitimate organizations. In fact, according to IBM's 2025 Cost of a Data Breach report, 16% of breaches now involve AI, usually some kind of AI-generated phishing or deepfake impersonation. Hackers are intensifying the speed and impact of their attacks, so that means defenders have to do some intensifying of their own. Part of that, of course, means implementing our own AI solutions, but our real edge over hackers has to come from people. They're the vulnerabilities that attackers target to get in, and they're the ones who can transform security tools from inert tech to powerful weapons against threats. So we need to help people adapt to the era of AI attacks, and we do that with the right training. But what is the right training? What does that mean? To answer that question, I've got a panel of experts here with me. Jake Paulson, Deputy Head of X-Force, Stephanie Carruthers, Global Head of Cyber Range, Chief People Hacker of X-Force, and Matt Cerny, Director, Cybersecurity at Integra Life Sciences. Thank you so much for joining me today, folks. To kick us off, I want to do a little round-the-horn style question. And I want to know, from your perspective, what is the biggest change that AI has brought to the cyber threat landscape so far? I'll throw to you first, Matt. What are you seeing out there?
It's the speed to attack, at least from a cybersecurity perspective. I think you mentioned, the phishing side of things, where it would take a while previously for an individual to kind of craft a phishing email. I think now with artificial intelligence, the ability to generate a well-crafted, no misspellings, logos, resembling exactly what the company would actually use. So that ability for threat actors to really speed to build up a potential attack and then also launch that attack becomes much broader as well. So their capabilities in terms of the ability to build it and then their capabilities to launch it at a very broad range of individuals, is kind of where we're seeing things.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it drives with something that I know Stephanie has talked about before, which is, just how fast you can churn out a phishing email now with AI, right? I think you were involved in some research, Stephanie, where it was like what it takes a person 2 days now takes an AI like 15 minutes or something. You want to talk a little bit more about that and how AI is affecting the cyber threats? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. When I think of AI and how it's kind of changed, the cyber threat landscape, I think of speed, scale, and polish. And exactly that. If my team is creating phishing emails for our clients, right, not maliciously, with their permission, of course, it could take us up to a couple of days to actually do the research, find, the right people, write the right email, get everything, as good as we can get it. But I can turn around and write a couple prompts and the AI can create that for me. So it's really saving attackers a lot of time, and it's letting them scale because they have so much time on their hands now.
Absolutely. So that speed, scale, and polish, I think, is a really nice summary of what we're seeing. Jake, anything to add? What are you seeing out there in the cyber threat landscape?
I really get concerned at the disinformation leading to misinformation, right? It's really, as you and Matt talked about, speed to attack, right? Snow talked about scaling and polishing, right? Like, I get the biggest concern, especially if you're a publicly held company or any greater person who exists in the public ecosystem, right? That intentional disinformation that then propagates to misinformation, right? Very different, but very naturally, one is a natural segue to the other. And that is really concerning to me.
Absolutely. So it sounds like overall, the kinds of AI attacks that we're seeing are really happening in this like social engineering, misinformation, disinformation space, right? It's not so much, they're using AI to generate malware or something. It's more like they're using AI to write phishing emails that you can't tell are phishing emails anymore. Does that sound like an accurate summary of what we're seeing?
I think so. But the one thing I would add to that is it's kind of hard to pinpoint if AI is doing it, right? If you get malware on, sent in an email, it's hard to say, okay, a human wrote this code or AI did. So that's why I think we as humans can see it a lot more from that human standpoint, the social engineering part of it, versus the technical, what's on my machine, how did it get here, who did it. So I think until we can start pinpointing those things, it's a little bit harder to really trace that.
That makes a lot of sense, right? There's the lines are very blurry, and who's to say, what AI is producing and what people are producing. And that does kind of bring us into, a question that I want to raise here, which is that as we're fighting these AI threats and we're thinking about the impact of AI on cyber threats, you often hear about this idea of, we should use AI to combat AI. And that's good. I think we all agree that's a good idea. But then what does that mean about the role of humans in cybersecurity, right? Where do we fit in this landscape where attacks are being automated, defenses are being automated? What are people doing? Stephanie, I'll throw it to you first. What are your thoughts on where do people slot in here still?
Yeah, so when I think of using AI for defense, I like to think of it as like a fire alarm, right? Or a fire detector. AI is really good at catching things that humans miss. It's good at alerting fast, but we still need the humans to actually review those alerts and decide, is it a real fire? Do I need to evacuate or investigate this? So I think humans still play a big part of it, but AI can be used to speed up things or find things that humans miss.
Makes sense. Matt, what about you? Any thoughts on where humans fit in this AI landscape right now?
Yeah, I think Stephanie raises a good point. I think the concept of the human in the loop is very important, right? To be able to discern what Jacob is saying in terms of misinformation or what's real or what's not real. The other component, I think, from the human perspective is artificial intelligence doesn't take away the constant need for basic cyber hygiene and foundational cybersecurity, right? So those things ultimately, very hard to take AI and say, hey, automatically build me good cyber hygiene or build me a good foundation. They're a good layer to add on top to do some of the automated detection and reviews. But ultimately, I think the humans, there's still a real need for good cybersecurity hygiene and good cybersecurity foundation to be built in there, and then layer on artificial intelligence on top of that, along with that human in the loop still to verify what's actually being identified.
Absolutely. And Jake, your take on where humans fit into this landscape.
Bringing a lot of my military background into this, right? Humans are, because we're inconsistent, right? Because we are human by nature, right? We have good days, we have bad days. We're better, we're sharper, we're weaker. We deteriorate, we atrophy in our attention, right? We are always going to be the weakest link in when you expect consistency, which is security is always a zero fail game. So humans are always the weakest link, right? However, right, humans are also those who have the ability to, most naturally and organically identify something that feels off. Call it a gut reaction, call it a sixth sense, right? We architect that into our AI solutions, right? Now, ideally, we want our AI solutions will be able to identify anomalous patterns, right? But humans are still those who bake their own logical and their own reasoning into these AI systems, right? We're trying to create them like our own mind works quite often, right? So we are still, right, in theory, we still have the keys and we should still be driving the car, right? Telling the car where to go. So I think that's one thing that really comes with me as, where humans' really big role is in this. But I think also as you think about attackers using AI, and a lot of attack groups have fingerprints, right? They have profiles, they have consistent behavior that they return to, right? The more you start seeing AI being used by attackers and crowdsourcing a lot of different attack methods, I do start to wonder how much of those fingerprints are going to dissolve. Attackers are going to get more creative, and when it comes to writing their code, right, or crowdsourcing and open sharing, a lot of their TTPs and a lot of how they write their code, right? I do wonder as much, our ability to identify who. Attribution is already a difficult game. It's already really, really hard. It's intentionally difficult. I do wonder how much of our ability to conduct attribution is going to dissolve because the fingerprints are going to start to blend together.
I want to kick this off with a quote from IBM Global Managing Partner of Cybersecurity Services, Mark Hughes. He wrote an article called Training Like It's Real. And he said, and this is the quote, The less prepared an organization is, the more likely a single phishing email or phishing call could trigger a massive cyber crisis. Training employees and executives to respond effectively in these moments makes all the difference. So I want to dig into this sentiment, right? What makes training particularly valuable when it comes to defending against and adapting to AI-driven cyber attacks? Matt, I'll start with you. Do you have any thoughts on what makes training so valuable?
Yeah, I think learning repetitively, right? So not just kind of one exercise, but multiple exercises, and getting that muscle memory down, so people really kind of understand, hey, look, if something does happen, these are the steps and these are the device that I've been trained on to take, whether that's reporting it, whether that's escalating it, whether that's communicating with a fellow partner or your manager. Those are the concepts of training and muscle memory that really become important when you're dealing with a potential incident or trying to identify, hey, is this a potential incident?
I like this idea of muscle memory, right? Because it really emphasizes the fact that training isn't just about learning something new, it's about doing something new, right? Jake, I wanted to bring you in here too. Do you have thoughts on what makes training so effective, so powerful for dealing with these AI-driven cyber attacks?
Yeah, I can even go back to a lot of my sports days as well, right? Like there's a saying that always comes in my head from a lot of my old coaches, right? Like amateurs will train until they get it right. Professionals train until they cannot get it wrong. And it is a difficult thing, right? That you can't just train when it's perfect. You can't just train when the sun is shining. You can't just train when it's convenient. It has to be, you have to be stressed. You have to have bad days. It's like I talked about. Why is the human the weakest link, right? Because we have bad days. Because we're imperfect. Because we are a variable response. And so because of that, like you have to train when you're not perfect. You have to train because you're a team of humans. As much as we want to orchestrate and automate with agentic AI a lot of our workflows, we're still humans. And and I think that's something we'll get into when we talk about the cyber range, right? Like you have to train with humans and you have to train as a team. And if you don't train as a team, you're not going to know when someone's having a good day or a bad day. You're not going to know what work rest cycle looks like. You're not going to know what it's like to be at the end of your wits and then have to make really hard decisions that have ramifications to your entire company and all your shareholders, right? And that's something that I think shareholders, expect of us, right? It's something we have to train for.
I like that you bring in that kind of cognitive load, right? Like that psychology, that emotion that goes into it. And because that too is a part of training that I think often gets overlooked, right? We think of, or at least I think of, when I think cybersecurity training, right? I think about some slides you watch and you click through and whatever, and it doesn't deal with that sort of thing, right? And so I think it's good that you highlight this as an important aspect of training. And speaking of which, cybersecurity training does get kind of a bad rep, right? Like I just said, I think a lot of us think of it as like it's the slideshow, it's the cheesy videos, it's whatever, and the people taking it often kind of joke about it and not really caring about it. The people presenting it are often like, we're doing this because we have to tick a box. I'm wondering why training still has such a reputation when there is this different way to see it that Jake talked about, that Matt talked about, as something much more dynamic, something much more embodied. Stephanie, I want to throw to you. What do you think it is that keeps training, is seen as such a bad, kind of negative, not helpful thing, right?
Yeah. So I think a lot of cybersecurity training that I've seen, it optimizes for completion, but not for capability. And so it kind of becomes a checkbox at the end of the day, and they're not really taking a step back and looking at things holistically. And the issue isn't always the training itself, it's how organizations can implement it. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. One of the things that I like to look at for security awareness training, for example, is a lot of times it says don't click on bad links, and don't give your password. Well, as from an attacker point of view, I'm not going to do those things. I'm going to be very creative with how I try to get information from you. So I think it's a lack of showing real examples of how the organization is being attacked, right? It's kind of like the boogeyman. We could tell people all day long, watch out for the boogeyman, but if we don't actually sit there and describe the boogeyman's characteristics and who he targets and what he does, then it's hard for people to really see, understand, and know how to look out for that.
I think there's also another component in there as well, is people receive information differently, right? So, from a security awareness perspective or education perspective, we have generations in the workforce now, right? So some of them may want to actually read a element of cybersecurity awareness, where somebody else might want a 2-minute video around cybersecurity. Some people might want to be given some sort of puzzle where they've kind of be more interactive in it. So I think the way that we actually give cybersecurity awareness training also has to be adaptive and relevant to the way that people want to consume it. I think Jacob also mentioned another good point as he kind of was talking about different things is, it de-escalates your energy levels. The more training that you get, the less maybe heightened that you are in a particular scenario, right? So that repetition really starts to say, hey, look, I've experienced this before, either through an exercise or a simulation. I don't feel as intense or concerned. I'm going to make a better decision now because I've gone through this before.
Yeah, this is great. We're already starting to talk about what good training actually looks like, right? Like Stephanie, you had mentioned actually digging into the concrete, real ways that organizations are being attacked. Matt, you mentioned the way it's got to be kind of adaptive, the way that it should be exercises that you're going through so you build that muscle memory. Jake, you have anything to add on there in terms of characteristics that you think make training like actually effective and actually powerful?
I always focus on the person's feelings, on the participants' feelings. How did it make them feel? From the beginning to the end, how can you evoke an emotional response that actually causes them to internalize it, to assess what's happening and changing within their own stress levels, right? Within their own psyche, their own brain, their own thoughts, their own workflows, and then put them into a decision where they're going to have to start thinking about it. And you want them to walk away and go, man, I don't want to say that that didn't suck, but man, that was tough. Or I really don't want that to suck that bad next time. Like sometimes that's the most effective way. Trauma bonding does work. It's not the best way to do it. It's not the most friendly way, but you do want people to feel. You want it to change them. You want them to evolve during it. It's just like a book, right? You assess a book from beginning to end. How did they start coming in and how did they leave with it? And did it make them better? And you don't want the ends to justify the means. You don't want it to be something really terrible because Matt, we want people to come back. We want the rest of our team to continue to join. We don't want to make this a terrible experience so they begrudgingly come angry at it every time. But you do want them to realize, man, this was really helpful. And it's not helpful just for my job. It's helpful for my life.
And so now that we've started building up, some of these qualities of good training, right? Talking about realism, the emotional impact, the dynamic kind of simulation impact. Let's get into an example of a concrete example of that kind of training that ticks out those boxes. And I'm talking, of course, about the cyber range. Now, for listeners who may not be familiar with what exactly a cyber range is, let's start with a definition. And I'll throw to you, Stephanie. Can you explain to us what is a cyber range and how is it different from just like any other traditional tabletop exercise?
Yeah, absolutely. So at IBM, our cyber ranges are, I like to call it controlled chaos in an environment where we really stress test executive and technical teams through simulated cyber crises. So we work really closely with an individual at the organization, like, okay, what keeps you up at night? What are your concerns? What would you like to test? And we create a whole immersive multi-hour scenario to test their team and the people they want to bring in. So it's real people, it's real adversary behaviors. Unlike tabletops, which is a little bit more role-playing, this is as immersive and hands-on as we can make it to really stress test what could happen in these type of engagements.
I like the word immersive. The way I try to convey it to folks, right, to adapt that is like, think if you're learning a second language, right? And then you're put in an environment with a room of people that only speak that second language that you're learning, and you have to actually effectively communicate to them. That's the immersive experience that you're getting is, hey, you're not just reading a book, you're actually taking potentially what you learned and you're applying it and then seeing if the other people are comprehending and understanding what you're saying.
And Matt, right, there's words that you got to learn you can't use.
Correct.
There's words that are insults. There's words that are touch words. That are landmines, right? Like you got to really learn that language, right? And that vernacular, right?
Yeah.
You can't just stub your toe and put your foot in your mouth, right? Sometimes those have massive legal ramifications.
Yeah. So, we've already started touching on exactly what it is that makes, a real training in a realistic, immersive environment more effective than other kinds of training, talking about learning to speak that language, which I think is a very powerful metaphor. And Jake, I know you've, not to put too fine a point on it, you've already been talking about the emotional side of things, but I was hoping you could just talk a little bit about, what it is about this realistic in-scenario environment that makes it that brings such particular benefits that makes people walk away being like, wow, I really feel like I experienced something I didn't have before. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, a lot of people walk in, they just go, gosh, is there a right answer to this? Tell me what I got to do to get out of this. Like they're used to multiple choice sections and, security awareness training where there is a right answer, right? And it's dynamic. Lots of times there isn't the right answer. There's just a less wrong answer. A best of bad choices that sometimes you have to make, and that's really difficult, right? Now, I would also say there is a structure to the response. There is a science to this. It's not all art. So, hey, here are some of the building blocks to the scientific response, right? And if you think about, like again, back to the military, right? I don't care who's sitting in that seat, in this job, in this function, this role. I don't care who's sitting in it. You have expectations of what we're looking for you to do. Here's the 10 core things that everyone's looking at you to do. You are the head of your function, the head of your entire company at doing these 10 things. We're all looking for you to do this. And if you don't know, you got to find someone else to call. There's external help out there. You got to have your Rolodex of people you can call on. And I need you to be confident in that, right? So there is a science. You can write playbooks out. There are ways to prepare yourself in that. So you can think about it. You can rehearse it. Matt, you can walk in with the playbook. So when you sit in that seat, you could be more confident. But lots of times, sadly, the first time when you get faced with one of these crises, it might be the first time you've ever read that playbook or you've ever read that plan, and you want to try and practice it, but maybe you don't get that chance. Maybe you're brand new to the company. But I would sure like to, whoever sits in that seat, if they're brand new to the company, there still is hey, here's a list of expectations.
Yeah, that's a really good point, I think, about how this dynamic simulation, this immersive simulation, lets you practice both the art and the science, right? Like it lets you both practice the plan, try to implement the theory, but also deal with the fact that theory doesn't always map cleanly onto reality, right? Sometimes things don't go the way you planned them to go or wanted them to go. And so you have to make those more artful decisions. And I think that's a really great kind of encapsulation of what makes the cyber range training so powerful. But I was wondering, if anybody here has any, stories about anything you've seen in the cyber range or work you've done in the cyber range that you feel like helps illustrate what makes it so valuable.
I think going back to what Jacob said about the feelings perspective, right? So, a tabletop exercise and you're kind of talking through a particular scenario, it's a little different when right in front of you, all of a sudden, your screen locks up, and there's a threat actor image on your screen. And now the telephone's ringing and someone's asking you a question, so your emotions really start to come out, right? I mean, all of a sudden this laptop, and again, that's yours, you're now locked out of. And all of a sudden you're receiving a phone call and you're being questioned on, hey, what are you seeing? What are you identifying? And being able to respond, under that type of pressure is a little bit different, than your traditional tabletops where you're just kind of asking that question. So, there's a visual perspective of it. There's, all your different senses are being tested, kind of your vision, your eyes, all those emotions kind of come through it. And really you have to respond in kind in that environment.
Yeah, I think the cyber ranges, they don't just teach skills, but they really build confidence under stress. And that's really what we repeat over and over as much as we can. And a lot of times when we get folks that leave, that's some of their biggest takeaways is, wow, this is something we really have to practice. Because a lot of times we see folks, they know things on paper. It makes sense. But when you actually have to put them in a room with other people and put it into practice, you start to see things crumble quite a bit, which is very common if it's not practiced. And so that's why we have a lot of our clients coming back over and over, because they know how important this is to keep getting it right, keep finding where those flaws are before they're doing it in an actual, real attack.
It's really funny, right? Like you'll have companies come in or, we'll see companies come in. There's an all-star. There's someone who really is confident, who really has exercises, has been through it in real life, and is really leading the charge. And when you really get dynamic, you can walk over and you can tap that person on the shoulder and say, you just got called home sick because you just got called home because your kid is sick, right? Or you got the flu, right? Or I want to remind you all, this will occur over 180 days. You're going to get sick. You got to go on vacation. Like there's real life that happens outside of this work life. So yeah, it's time for you to take a break. You're doing too good right now. We need to increase the stress level to the team and make them realize you can't play hero ball. Like you can't rely on one person just to do this, right? And so when you do that, then the team realizes, we all got to step up. Who's going to fill in that person? So you start thinking about chain of command, right? And so these are things that you get used to. Again, kind of the military background. This is just natural order for for a lot of my my prior life. But people start realizing, oh, who is that second person up? Do we have a redundancy behind them? Is that person a single point of failure collectively on the team in the way we behave as a team? But also, who sits into that role, right? And I think it's one of the things most important is when we try to remind people, like, hey, these 3-4 hours, however long we're in here, this actually is a prolonged period. This will occur for 20, 40, 60, a very long period of time. And this isn't going to go away. And then you're going to have a legal tail to it, right? So you better get comfortable with being uncomfortable here, right? That's where we want people to get to.
Absolutely. So given everything we've said today about the value of training, and especially the cyber range training, the simulation training, it seems kind of clear to me that one of the primary tasks in front of us is to get organizations to see that security training is a strategic lever, right? It's like a critical control. It's not just a support role or a tick-the-box compliance exercise, right? It shouldn't be optimized for completion, as you said, Stephanie. So how do we start moving in that direction, right? Do we have thoughts on how we actually get people to start seeing training as a critical control? Matt, I'll start with you. Do you have any thoughts there?
I think one of the takeaways from the range perspective is that because those emotions come out, because those feelings actually happen, when you go back to work and you receive a phishing simulation, or you see an article that's posted around security awareness or a video, you're more compelled to look at that particular piece of information and actually pay attention, because you've experienced something that brought out a level of emotion, a trigger, so to speak, in you, where you're saying, hey, look, I really need to pay attention to this now. I've seen what the potential downside or impact of that could be to myself or to the organization. So now I really want to pay attention to it. So I think, Jacob, back to your point of, hey, you're in a particular exercise for a period of time, and it is a long period of time of you're saying, hey, how do I get out of this? When does it ultimately end? But I do think your takeaway is when you do go back to the office, ultimately saying, hey, now I'm seeing the training information coming out. I should pay attention to it. Because again, the more you're paying attention to it, the decrease of that stress level is going to come down. If you ever get into that particular exercise or that scenario again, it'll start to come down.
I love that. It's like the cyber range itself becomes a way of driving home that message of how critical this kind of stuff is. Stephanie, your thoughts on this issue?
Yeah, so I guess I like to think of training like fire drills, right? We shouldn't run them because we know there's a fire tomorrow or compliance says we should, but really we should run them because we don't want confusion to spread. We want people to know where to go. They know where they should be. I mean, practice saves lives in fire drills, right? But security training should be the same. It shouldn't be awareness. It should be all about preparedness.
And Jake, your thoughts on kind of driving home this message on the strategic value of training?
I like to focus on, why does your company exist, an organization exist, and not just that, but what is your function within that, and why does your function exist within the organization, right? And so a lot of the lessons that you learn in security, incident response, crisis management, business continuity, disaster, all of these lessons can be baked into every role in the function. Whether that's, hey, who's your backup? Or whether that's, hey, how do we document what we actually do here? And how does that input, how does our output of what we do lead to an input of why the company exists? Most of the time, that's to make money in one way, shape, or form, right? By delivering a good or a service or produces something, right? So I'd like to really think about, like, hey, all of these lessons that you learn in a cyber attack or a cyber crisis, right? All of these lessons can be baked in everywhere throughout the business. Continuity throughout the business, because we all exist to make sure the business is continuing to thrive. We're all shareholders in the success of the business, right? And I think that if you can kind of get the participants to shift their perspective, as this is a compliance-driven exercise, to this is how we make sure collectively our business continues to thrive, right? This is the survival and not just survival, but thriving of our business, and that's where you want to get people to emotionally align themselves to and become invested in.
Yeah, I think there's an element of team building that comes out of it too. You all kind of went through this particular scenario, and you made it out. And then ultimately you feel more confident when you're reaching out to individuals. You're not so, hey, do I need to report this? Should I report this? Hey, I'm going to report this because I've got a relationship, something that I experienced before, it, bubbled up into something larger in the exercise. Now I don't want that to ultimately happen. So relationship and team building, becomes prominent as well.
So Matt, we talked about closing the assumptions gap, right? Like one thing that's super fun in these exercises is you'll ask somebody, hey, who are you telling right now? And you'll see the CEO be like, what do you mean you're not telling me? But then like all of the participants in the room will be like, sir, man, these things happen like 65 times a year. I can't tell you every time. And so it closes that assumptions gap really, really effectively. Because then, as Matt, as you're saying, right? Oh, I built a relationship with you. I'm gonna call you because I knew you had an assumption I should call you. It might not be documented, and you might have, because you were really collaborative during this exercise. I might call you to problem solve elsewhere, and that's one of the real outputs in there.
Yeah, I love how this conversation has really highlighted the fact that something that the cyber range has that other forms of training don't necessarily have is that human element, those relationships, those emotions. Because again, I think that at least for me as a sort of outsider here, I don't think about that stuff when I think about cybersecurity training necessarily, right? I do think about just the pure technical, hard-nosed kind of stuff, but this stuff is just as important, and I think it's really, really valuable that it's such a focus of the cyber range. So, look, we've had this a very wide-ranging conversation over the last half hour here, and to kind of close us out today, I just want to ask each of you, if you could boil this conversation down to like one core takeaway, one thing that you want anybody listening to this to walk away knowing or doing, what would that be? And I'll start with you, Stephanie. What's your kind of core takeaway from all this?
Yeah, my core takeaway would be AI has changed the speed of attacks, but training has changed the outcome.
I love that. Jake, how about you? What's your takeaway?
Just practice, 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 practice. Teamwork, team building, practice. It's never the wrong time. Don't wait till it's checked. Embed it to everything you do in life.
Absolutely. And Matt, close us out here. What's your takeaway?
Yeah, I think capitalize on AI as an augmentation, right? Continue to focus on the foundational side of things. Utilize AI to the best of its ability. Build that human in the loop to confirm what you're actually seeing. And then back to what Jake said, rinse and repeat. You can't just do it kind of once. You've got to do it multiple times and continuous training.
So that's all the time we have for today, folks. I want to thank our panelists, Matt, Jake, and Stephanie. Thank you to the viewers and the listeners. Please subscribe to Security Intelligence wherever podcasts are found. Stay safe out there. And remember that security training is as effective as you make it.